Let's talk about Google Glass. How optimistic are you that something like Google Glass can go mainstream?
Well, I think, the way Google characterizes it now is that, Glass is still a beta at this point. And I think when you talk about a $1,500 price point, it's still, I think, very much intended towards developers to be able to get to experiment and develop applications on Glass. I think the reality is, if you try the product and you read the reviews, it's probably going to be a while before it becomes a real mass market hit. It is perhaps interesting to those of us that live here in the Valley and that really love gadgets and technology. But I think it's going to be a while before mainstream really adopts Glass in any broad-scale way.
Keith Raboy of Coastal Ventures told me zero chance of Google Glass going mainstream. Is that too extreme?
Well, I think it's too early to predict that. I certainly would make that prediction myself. I mean, I think, look, when Google bought Android in 2005, everybody thought that the idea of Google going into operating systems in mobile was absolutely nuts. Nobody thought that an American company in a land of Nokia and Ericsson and Siemens would become a major player in operating systems. And I think, looking back 9 years now, you can see that Google really executed incredibly well on that. So I'm certainly not going to count Google out on this at this point.
So in terms of wearables in general, as a mobile investor, how closely are you looking at wearables? Even when it comes to wristbands, those still aren't going mainstream.
Well, no, I think, I might beg to differ on that. I think, we're not investors in Fitbit, and we're certainly not, fuel band investors at Nike, but we're very much believers in that trend. One of our investments, my partner Andrew Braccio led, is called MyFitnessPal, that aggregates a lot of the fitness and nutrition data that sits on top, essentially, of those wearables. And we think that's a very real and durable trend. So I think that the fitness aspect of wearables, I think, is extremely real, and I think it's accelerating, even if the Glass aspects are probably still, in beta, as I said before.
What about the idea that maybe people just don't want a measured life, to measure their life completely? I mean, I have plenty of wristbands that I don't wear. I haven't been compelled to wear them every day.
Well, I think, everyone has a different view of this, right? I think there's a lot of folks that I know. My wife is one example that is a very serious user of Fitbit and has really gotten a lot of motivation from it. And the idea that you're able to compete with your friends across the country and other parts of the world, I think, is a very motivating behavior. So I think, Fitbit and Fuel Band and a lot of the trends around wearables around the fitness space, I think, is a very genuine trend.
So when you're looking at mobile right now, what's hot? What's the hottest thing out there?
Well, I think that, if I mention just a little bit of context, I think the last 5 years has been about ubiquity, and I think the next 5 to 7 years is about richness, right? So I think, to my earlier comment, Android was purchased by Google in 2005, iPhone in 2007, and now we're at about 1 billion smartphones shipped this year and about 215 million tablets. So this idea of getting to mass ubiquity has happened. It's occurring in mass consumer adoption today. But I think despite the fact that we have smartphones, a lot of the apps are still dumb or not fully integrated to all the signal and the information that's on those phones. So when you look at a Google Now service or a SwiftKey, which is a predictive keyboard, or a Relate IQ that is trying to transform CRM, the idea of these applications becoming smart or becoming predictive, I think, is one of the major areas of what's new.
So you're speaking with the co-founder of Secret today. Secret apps like Secret and Whisper, all the rage right now. Also very controversial. Some investors very bullish. Other people like Mark Andreessen think these things aren't good for the world, aren't good for humanity. What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I should point out we're not investors in Secret or Whisper, but I think they're fascinating services. They've had, obviously, an incredible amount of viral growth to date. I would also point out that the idea of anonymity on the internet is not a new idea. Going all the way back to Blackboard services or chat rooms, these set of behaviors that people are concerned about, plus the idea of people speaking and sharing ideas anonymously, has been around for a substantial period of time. So I don't think, now that it's on a mobile device and implemented in this way, it's not necessarily any better or worse than those previous instantiations. I do think that Secret and Whisper, I presume, I have not spoken with them specifically yet, are very likely to have to put the right moderation and monitoring in place. And I think they have to do it, and they will do it, I'm sure, as a part of making those communities robust.
What about Snapchat?
I think Snapchat's a little bit different, as you probably know. I mean, Snapchat's more about an ephemeral service as opposed to being anonymous per se.
Is it here to stay?
I think Snapchat has passed a tipping point where it's clearly a service that people are using as a day-to-day communication tool. So yes, I do think it's here to stay.